is host of Behind the Facade, Mental and Emotional Game in Real Estate. Let's hear more about that in a while. And Kevin O'Reilly is Division F Director and incoming Club Growth Director in District 71. And his new podcast is called My Worst Interview Ever, which I think is a wonderful title for a podcast. I have a musician friend, Eleanor McAvoy, who wrote a song, You'll Hear Better Songs Than This, which is kind of interesting when the DJ would put that on and announce what it's called. Because they might then go and say, Yes, you will. Yes, I have. So maybe starting with Paul, tell us a bit about yourself and your entry into podcasting.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and welcome to everybody. I live in Cork, Ireland now. I from Limerick, spent some years in Dublin, went to the UK for 30 years, and came to Cork in 2005. My first experience of using audio podcasting was 2007 on a platform called Audio Boo, which is actually where I met you, Brian. That's another story. But yes, I took it up in 2007.
Audio Boo became Audio Boom. It was the go-to platform at the time for podcasting in its early years. It was about 3 or 4 years popular at that time. Tell us quickly why podcasting.
Good question. I was a writer before, and I decided that uh, I would try using my voice. And 3,500 episodes later on Audio Boom, I got a bit of experience in. But that, I suppose, is why I got into it as a bit of an experiment. I never acted on a stage, you see. It probably felt to me like a poor man's opportunity to use his voice on one type of stage.
And what a wonderful voice we've heard through Toastmasters down through the years. I'm going to do some quick fire questions in this session with each of you, and then I'm going to dive into a one-on-one interview style with all of you throughout this evening. We're with you for about an hour. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the comments box. We can bring them up on screen. Anything we say that is a bit confusing or uses any acronyms you don't know, we shouldn't use them. But if we do, do call us out and ask, what did you mean by that? To Gavin, your journey into podcasting, how did it spark for you?
My journey into podcasting was I did a course in the UK with a chap by the name of Daniel Priestley. And Daniel wrote a book called Key Person of Influence. And when I read this book on a holiday, I came away from it really, really enthusiastic about the whole process that he explains about how to position yourself inside of your industry as a key person. And so I met with Daniel, joined his program, and for about 9 months I was going, and they were talking about the different ways that you can create an audience and all of this. And so not long after I finished my course with Daniel, COVID commenced. And so I was sitting at home in the lockdown in April of 2020. And I can remember thinking to myself, there was two different thoughts. First of all, I must put some of this stuff that I learned from Daniel into practice. But the other side that is in the middle of the COVID lockdown, there was this great uncertainty in the property market about what's going to happen to the property market. There was a lot of people getting furloughed and being made unemployed, and a lot of people were starting to kind of get very concerned about what was going to happen to property. And I remember thinking, this reminds me of 2008 quite a lot. And I got very badly damaged financially in the 2008 crash. I ended up very, very negative equity, and took many years to get out of this hole that I had created for myself. And so I started sharing my story in 2008 and the comparisons and what it looked a little bit like today in 2020. And it seemed to resonate with the audience, and I've been going ever since. And so one episode a week consecutively without breaking my streak for 256 weeks in a row now.
Hold those thoughts because we'll get back to them in the longer interview with yourself, Gavin. Kevin, you are a newer podcaster. It says you have launched a new podcast. Had you been in podcasting before this podcast?
I have not, and if I've ever wanted to feel imposter syndrome, I'm going to maybe feel it here with Paul's 3,000 and Gavin's continuous streak. My podcasting history, shall we say, is quite short, but I have my first series launched. It is an eight episode series. I do have 30 other episodes in the bank, ready to be released slowly but surely. And the reason I did start it is very similar to what Gavin had mentioned about, where do I position myself within my own industry, and where do I become a person of influence. The podcasting came through Toastmasters. It was part of one of the pathway journeys that I chose, and I thought, you know what, I know nothing about it. Let's have a go. And that's pretty much how I treat Toastmasters. Is it's an opportunity for me to learn something I never knew before, and to really push myself out of that comfort zone.
That
So
was
yes,
my first pathway, presentation mastery level 4, and I had that podcasting thing on it. And for me, it was the opposite, because there was nothing for me to learn, and that came upon me because I had the skills in the bank, but I did something with my daughter that at least it helped her step up into podcasting. I'm going to do quick fire around the screen, and I love this Brady Bunch setup here that we have with the four of us on screen. And the quick fire, and I mean quick, is artificial intelligence in podcasting. Yes or no, and why? Paul.
I haven't a clue.
Will I come back to you?
When I phone a friend, I use artificial intelligence for other reasons, but I haven't yet mastered the art of getting two people to talk to each other with the simulated voice from artificial intelligence. I've heard it done, can be very convincing, but truthfully, never tried it for that purpose.
Oh, so in the widest sense of using AI and your podcasting, same question to Gavin.
I find it really, really useful. And there's a couple of different ways that I've been leveraging it. The first thing is, coming up with a new episode every single week can be challenging, because sometimes some weeks there's some great news and you can kind of pick a topic to kind of talk about. Other weeks you're kind of scratching, wondering, geez, what will I talk about? Sometimes the inspiration hits me and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something on that. But sometimes I'm really wondering. And so just go into ChatGPT, give me, 5 possible topics to kind of talk about. And you may not like any of them, but it might actually just give you sufficient inspiration to actually talk about something different. And so that's been the first thing. One thing I would say about, we're seeing a lot of use of, AI generated images, videos, and voice and stuff like that. And as I'm seeing that, I think a lot of people are being turned off by that. I think that certainly when I see an artificially generated video, I immediately swipe, just not interested, because it's always created to generate interest, but it's noticeable that it is actually fake. Maybe that will improve, but at the moment, it doesn't appeal to me to watch something that's artificially generated. I think people enjoy the social interaction of one to one. And I don't think that will go away. I think we're safe in that regard because it's human connection that we kind of desire. But one thing that I have done, which is quite interesting in Instagram, and I have quite a big following in Instagram in the last couple of months. It's just started to grow. And what we actually started testing, my team and I, we took a video of something I recorded only in the last 3 or 4 months, and then we took something I spoke at a conference about 5 years ago, and we actually lip synced it so that it was on a current video with me lip syncing something from 5 years ago. It's absolutely nobody could tell the difference, and that was incredible. I was just, wow, this is powerful stuff.
So to be authentic, you look like you look 5 years. You look like now, but you've got the intelligence of what you were saying 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
exactly.
Same question to Kevin. AI in podcasting, yes or no, and why?
I think there's a place for it. Absolutely. And it just touching on what Gavin said about that idea generation. I too find sometimes thinking of the ideas. What does that next podcast? What is somebody going to ask? What direction are we going in? A couple of words into ChatGPT, it gives you a couple of ideas. Exactly like Gavin. If none of them are any good, great, but it might spark something to get you moving. What I also use AI for is actually writing the episode. What do they call the
Intro
biographies?
or
Yeah, yeah,
description.
yeah. So writing the descriptions, I use the AI. It's literally you record. Once I record the transcript, I record the transcript separately, copy that into ChatGPT, and literally ask it to write me out my description with links to everybody and whoever was on the show, and it brings it up perfectly to the with the prompts. Obviously, I've worked on over time, and it brings it up exactly as I need it. But I also use another AI tool called AI video clips, which literally you upload the whole recording and it will cut clips for you so that you can use on your socials. It will bring up all of the subtitles. It'll make everything you need. Again, as long as you prompt it to look for specific things, it'll do it for you. And it can make short form, couple of seconds to minute, minute and a half. It is a fantastic tool. Saves so
If,
much time.
if I could indulge you to just put in some detail of that into the comments, and we'll bring it up on screen.
Will do.
And I'll jump back to Gavin for the next question. And in the totality of your podcasting, is it presenter driven? Is it about you and what you need to say and want to say, or is it about what the audience and the analytics is asking you to present? So does it come from you in the first instance, or is it an audience driven
I think
experience?
in my experience, it's been a combination of the two. I started with just I'm going to talk about this because it feels familiar, and then after maybe 10 episodes, actually it was my 15th episode. I brought a guest on for the first time, and so I interviewed somebody, and that was it was interesting doing that because for the first time I didn't have to really do a huge amount of work. Normally, you script out what you're going to talk about and you create the headings and the various points that you're going to cover. So there's a fair bit of work goes into prep before I hit record. But then with this interview, all I had to do was have a conversation with a person and he brings all the value. So that was interesting. And then I noticed that I started asking people if you have any comments or, please leave a comment of any topics or questions you have. And that would start to filter in. And then I would go away and I would sort of think, okay, that's a good one. I'm going to do a whole episode on that.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm just going to do another quick fire for Paul. Does your Toastmastering help you in your podcasting? So does one help the other in either direction?
Oh, the podcasting has helped my impromptu speaking enormously. It's also helped my half prepared speeches because on Irish Talkers, every couple of weeks, I do a slot of about 12 minutes long on a topic that I choose. And I don't use any artificial intelligence in order to tell me what my topic is. Like the most recent one that I've recorded is all about the International Convention and about whether clubs are going to pay any attention to the recent letter from the international president, which urged clubs to set aside time to discuss the motions which were up for, which will be decided on in August, and also to consider who are the candidates for international director. And I did that with nothing more than the first paragraph of her letter published in the Toastmaster magazine, which is a terrific source of topics if you want to, if you're stuck, if you like. But because I know the Toastmasters year very well, I can say, right, we're recording in May. This is going to go out at the end of June. The topic that needs to be covered is this. And that's the way I do it. Has Toastmasters helped me as a podcaster? It's helped me in one particular respect, which drives me mad, which is the superfluous sounds that I'm inclined to make, the unnecessary ands and and now and sounds like that, which as an editor, as an editor of the sound, I systematically go around cutting out because apart from the fact that I don't want myself to sound so boring as I can sound if I have lots of ums and ahs, but I also don't want guests on Irish Talkers to be embarrassed themselves by how frequently they use those sounds. And I can tell you, some of the best speakers in the world, when you have them on a podcast, if you were to put that out, you damage their reputation.
That is a really, if I had thought of asking that as a question, that is really interesting. Is kind of, I think we're, over the ethical issue of cleaning that stuff, but to discuss it, maybe we'll come back to it at the very end. I think it's really interesting. I think we'd all do it, but are we on solid ground doing it? So let's come back to that maybe later. And just the last quick fire question before we all answer the question on screen is for Kevin, and it's who in podcasting inspires you?
Well, Kevin inspires me a little bit, as does Paul. But the diary of a CEO, it's just a very simple formula that he uses, and it just works. I like how it's cut. I like how it's used. I like how he uses short clips. He uses long clips to advertise it. I love the topics that he comes up with. It is wonderful. I'm not going to say I would like mine to turn out like that because that's his own way. I have my own way, but like everybody else here, we take snippets from everybody and we join it together to make our own. So yeah, what's the Stephen Bartlett?
The question on screen, who'd like to take it?
Well, I'll jump in with a quick one because when I saw this, it immediately, like a one-man production setup with AI, it's absolutely possible. But you can go even further than that. I've been playing around with. There is what inspired me is there's a podcast called Arnold's Pump Club, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger on a podcast. He's done 208 episodes. Is one of the biggest podcasts in the world now, and not a single word uttered by Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's all created by his voice, artificially created Arnold's voice. And I've heard another podcast where you can type into into the prompt. Basically, you say, "Please create a podcast about a certain topic between two people." And it will generate the two voices speaking to one another, and you just put that out there and you have nothing to do with it except that you're the guy who prompted it and you're uploading it.
So technologically, it's there. It's already there, and it sounds
Already
very convincing. Ethically, is it on solid ice?
Well, I think it depends what you're putting out there. I think ethically, if you're telling people this is a conversation between two AI bots that I've concocted, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you were to put out there like, oh my God, look, listen to what Joe Biden just said, and you could concoct and obviously go down a very bad path, and so I do think that there's huge risks with all this new stuff coming out.
So disclosure. Anybody else on aspects of this question? Thank you, TM Liu. Is that how I should pronounce your name? Any other aspects of answering this? Okay, thank you for that. What I'm going to do now is break it down into one-on-one interviews, and if it's okay with the lads, we will go in order of Paul, Gavin, Kevin, and I'm coming in from maybe eras of entry into podcasting, so that's the order, but equal time for all, and you're on the clock starting now with Paul. Paul, you mentioned it earlier. You and I met through probably the Irish Twitter sphere, the Irish Twitter world, which was the community that was very supportive of the blogging community, probably prior to your podcasting. So I know you prior to your podcasting days, and tell us about that kind of journey from writing, publishing, blogging to audio blogging, podcasting.
Okay, I did a bit of writing at school. I enjoyed writing. I became a letter writer during the period of time when I was seeking romance. I went
Love
full.
letter.
I wrote letters. Yes, I'm a letter writer. I was a letter writer, and crazy. I used to keep copies of all the letters I wrote. That's another story, let's say. That's going back a long way now.
Unsolicited, unacquainted, or were they part of a, were they well
Oh,
received?
these were letters that were within a relationship.
Okay.
I've always been one for connecting with people in other places, a long way away. I had a long series of letters with somebody living in Arizona and a series of
Pen
letters.
pal. Oh,
No,
pen
no,
pal?
no, no.
No,
A
no.
girlfriend. A
Girlfriend.
girlfriend I was looking to meet when I went to Arizona. Similar thing with a Japanese woman who was living in Spain as an artist. So I'd write her letters. But we'll never get to the end of my biography if I go on about stuff like that. The really big thing was a mixture of becoming a poet in 1995. That's one side to my writing, and that's seriously going on to this day. And more relevant to podcasting was 2000 and well was the birth of my daughter in 2005 and returning from the UK to Ireland. So in blogging terms, I set out to chronicle what it was like for a Irish father, me, to bring a very young baby back to Ireland. And that was like remigrating or whatever I used to call it back to Ireland. So I did an awful lot of blog posts, so usually about 3 or 4 a day. And then I got into experimenting when I heard of this very simple app. You could just tap, record yourself, and it would go up more or less automatically into a community. And my first one I did was standing outside Frawley's pub in Lahinch, which is in the west of Ireland, a seaside village, and a relatively famous pub, and recording sounds and talking about it there. And thus began a journey making so many short podcast episodes. It's almost embarrassing.
You
And
said
then,
earlier that it was about getting the writer's authentic voice, your voice, out there. So you'd write and craft for the written word. Toastmasters is very much about the spoken word. This is where your writing becomes audible.
well, I've never, apart from a few times, read something that I've written. I have written something that I have spoken because I record podcast episodes while walking the dog, and I will prepare speeches while talking to myself while walking the dog. In fact, it's much better than looking at a blank sheet of paper. Just turn on an audio recorder on your phone and talk as if you're talking to somebody. And one of my podcasts is very much a kind of personal diary. I've done two others, did a podcast called Business Jazz with my best friend Roger Overall for about 6 years, all about marketing business. And the two of us would just talk on that topic. The Irish Talkers podcast, on the other hand, is now recorded every 2 weeks, and there's one episode goes out each week, and one of the episodes is an interview, and the other is a kind of a magazine show. Um,
Your entry into Toastmasters would be in what year, and did podcasting come with that?
um, 2015, and podcasting has no connection whatsoever with Toastmasters in those days at all. I didn't come to Toastmasters to practice podcasting. I'd already done enough of it, really. I'd done a huge amount. I had plenty of confidence about producing podcast episodes and I've never had to think of what will the episode be about. And I do almost no preparation if I'm going to do an interview with somebody other than asking them some kind of a opening question and then working from what they have said.
So before we started, I mentioned that on Sunday last, I was 40 years in radio, my first radio show. At 37 years in radio, I joined Toastmasters all of 3 and a bit years ago. And similar to yourself, I didn't expect that I needed Toastmasters to help me in what I already knew. But how wrong was I? Because then I discovered that there is always plenty of room for improvement.
Oh,
Would you
look,
agree?
every episode, as far as I'm concerned, is just practice for the really good one I'm going to do in the future. So thousands of episodes later, I'm still looking forward to doing the best one.
But the ability for your practice in Toastmasters making your podcasting better, have you found any of that?
The biggest thing I'm learning and I have learned is about clutch words and stuff like that. It's so different from giving a speech because there is an audience. It always in my mind. I'm always talking to an audience, just like I'm talking to you now, but I'm actually talking to the people who will watch this video. And I'm doing my best to make myself intelligible to future uh, viewers or listeners. In terms of, I wish I could say table topics. Let's take table topics for a second. That's a quick answer to a question. And as you can see, I'm long winded. So, therefore, table topics helps me to be more succinct. How much does
In
it help? I'm not sure.
in radio, they say the clock is the producer. So if you're operating up to the top of the next hour, that's going to decide what content is in or out. Does the timekeeping of Toastmasters help you discipline your podcasting operations?
No, the person on Irish Talkers who disciplines me is the director, producer, editor, Moira O'Brien. And we do it on Zoom, and we don't show the video. And she will do things like wave at me and say, finish, and all these kind of things. Um, that that's Now we haven't had to produce a 1 hour episode which ends on the hour or even a half hour, and I haven't ever done one of those, although it would be a good challenge to have to do that. I'd love to have a radio show, Brian. Love it.
But just in the more, maybe to keep you succinct and edited in the delivery in the first instance, does the timekeeping of Toastmasters help you in the delivery?
It
Does it
should.
make does it
It
make the
should.
more verbose Paul more edited?
It should. Although in my writing over the years, I greatly value short sentences, and short sentences are very powerful, especially when you're podcasting. So, what I often do, not on my personal podcasts, but in the Irish Talkers podcast, I take out an awful lot of ands, the conjunctions that are, you know, awful. and weaken what you're saying.
Should Toastmasters in our district do more with podcasting to promote the best kept secrets around the Toastmasters International?
Yes, yes, yes. And it's
How?
interesting that there, well, first of all, a bit of practice by senior leaders, division directors, and area directors, and even club presidents would help. At the moment, there isn't any Toastmasters Club podcast. And the crazy thing is that we have prepared speeches at club meetings all the time. We have topics at club meetings all the time. It is ever so simple to record these, even the just the audio version of it, and produce episodes. You would need to produce them from a club, for sake of argument, at a certain frequency, same time, regularly. There is one club in the UK that I helped to start a podcast. It's called the Shilling Speakers Podcast. It's called,
They're,
and
they're pretty big.
pardon.
They're on the large side of membership in their club. They're
Oh,
not
they have a decent.
insignificant, but I mean they're quite large.
Oh yeah, yeah. They have a good membership, but they have been keeping up a podcast. It must be 3 or 4 years in now. There are a number of clubs around the world, Toastmasters clubs, which have podcasts, and there also are some districts that have a podcast. And of course, the one that could be a great example to people if they listen to it more, which is the Toastmaster podcast, which is hosted by Gavin, by Greg Gavin, Greg Gazin, excuse me, Greg Gazin. And that comes out every month or perhaps every 2 weeks. I forget now. Terrific episode, the latest one. Great episode in where he's interviewing a person who works at Harvard who will have a magazine article soon about the topic of talking. Well worth a listen.
And I was just going to say that all talking needs listening because of the ratio of 2 to 1. Can I finally ask you your last question before I move on to Gavin? Uh, your work ethic, you mentioned the frequency of a podcast. How do you apply the discipline that you might learn through Toastmasters? And I'm throwing you opportunities to pick up Toastmasters for what you can learn from it. The discipline, the work ethic to publishing podcasts, and maybe that comes from your writing. But what, in a brief word, what is your work ethic?
Well, the first thing you promise when you apply to join Toastmasters International and your local club is you promise to attend club meetings regularly. So that's the first element of the Toastmasters promise. Similarly, in podcasting, you ideally would promise your community to whom you are talking or delivering messages, you would promise to produce an episode every month, fortnight, week, daily, whatever it is. The It's difficult to recover from being unpredictable.
Yes, I think there is really something about the power of a publishing date, a publishing time, and sticking to it because it disciplines the creator and it forms habits for the listeners to pick up on. We'll come back to you for a quick fire Q&A at the end and some final thoughts and analysis on what we've been discussing tonight. But for the moment, Paul Mahoney, thank you very much. We'll move on to our second interview with Gavin Gallagher. Thanks, Gavin. Hello. You're listening into Paul, and I'm going to throw some of the same questions and maybe some different ones your way. But tell us a bit about Behind the Facade podcast and Gavin J. Gallagher. What is it? Who are you? And what's that podcast about?
Well, it's kind of a goes back a little bit into history. So what I got into property investing at quite a young age. My dad died when he was 45 and I was only 21. So I started getting quite involved in business and stuff at quite a young age. And around about the sort of the end of the 1990s, the start of the 2000s, when we talk about the noughties and everything kind of went crazy for that kind of 5 or 6 year period just before the crash. I was one of the Celtic Tiger Cubs, as I call myself. I was a young guy doing really well in property, and I built up this huge portfolio, tens of millions in value, and I was very, very successful financially. And I didn't see the 2008 crash coming my way, but it absolutely totally devastated my finances. It lost my family home, ended up divorced, all sorts of sort of nasty stuff. And the thing is it took about 6 years to recover from that humbling experience of being reduced to zero income when you were flying first class and things like that. So very humbling experience. And so I started sharing that experience on my podcast. And the thing that I've discovered as a result of sharing that, and it requires you to be quite vulnerable to share those kind of things. But I found it to be therapeutic for me, but also hugely people would find it would resonate with them. There was a lot of people out there who went through very similar difficulties, but they're kind of covering it up and keeping it as their private problem that they're having. And so anytime I shared the fall that I went through and the difficult experiences, I don't do it like to kind of shine a light on me. I do it to kind of sort of say, look, you're not alone. I'm here. I went through this. You can get through to the other side. Because I know a lot of people that actually resorted to suicide over the stress of it and things like that. And so I feel like that there's a kind of a deeper purpose to this, and it's trying to help prevent suicide and to try to just make young people who are easily led by social media and advice that you get online and all this kind of stuff, and you see these guys going around driving the Ferrari, walking down the steps of a private plane, and young people are very impressionable. That's impressive, but a lot of that is fake. A lot of it is rented cars, and you literally rent the airplane at the airport. You never ride on the airplane, and when you realize all of this, and you realize the devastation that can be created from being sort of going for the get rich quick scheme, that really can cause people to totally destroy their lives and their family and stuff like that. So what I decided to do was just share my experiences, warts and all, and go deep and just all of the lessons that I learned from it. So my podcast, I talk about an experience. I'll see some piece of news. Sometimes I'm talking about the housing crisis. Sometimes I'm talking about the mindset, the importance of mindset. And sometimes I'm talking about just the best deal I ever did, the worst deal I ever did, all of these things that get people kind of, you start to learn the episodes that are likely to get a higher engagement rate. And I don't always put that kind of episode out there, but you do find that I'm pretty sure this one will do well. And usually it does, it resonates quite well with the audience.
From that kind of cathartic description of how you entered podcasting, did did you get the bug for it at the same time? Were you being driven by how it was helping you and then how it was helping your audience? Was it this feedback loop that was
Yeah,
helping you kind of get
that's a
deep
great
into it?
that's a great description for it, Brian, because it's funny. This ties into Toastmasters as well. I mentioned the fact that Daniel Priestley, I had done this course with Daniel Priestley, but I was also doing Toastmasters. I had joined only the year prior, and I was approaching level 4 or level 5 in presentation mastery. And I can remember seeing one of the projects was to record and publish something like 7 episodes of a podcast. on whatever topic you want. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, so I did this thing with Daniel Priestley, and over here I have this project. And so I started it. And when I published the first, one or two episodes, it was, it was kind of felt awkward. I wasn't quite sure of myself. I didn't like, who am I? Bit of imposter syndrome there. And then the fourth and the fifth became a little bit easier. But I think it was the seventh when I got this message, and it was a guy just saying like, wow, this has really helped me. Gavin, thank you so much for putting that episode out. He had actually stopped a transaction that he was going through with on the back of me explaining like what happened to me. And that was a really powerful bit of feedback. I remember going, whoa, like I'm actually impacting people in a major way here. And that for me was, okay, I'm absolutely on the right path here. And so I did it, more. And then you start getting really encouraging feedback online and stuff. And I remember placing third in the Irish charts. My podcast was up in third place. I remember there was a website you could go to called Chartable, and it told you what the website, where you placed in the niche that you're in or the genre. And I was in the investing genre, and I can remember seeing, Diary of a CEO was at the top, and then the next one down was Tim Ferriss, and then me, and I was like, "What? Like I'm here?" And that was a real moment when, whoa, I'm really doing well here. Like I'm delighted with myself. And so I just kept going, and just every week, no matter what, Monday morning, 5 a.m., the upload was going out. I was not missing an upload. And sometimes I'd be out on the weekend with my family, and it would be 10 p.m. on a Sunday night when I start the process of putting out Monday's podcast. And just became like a bug in a very much in a big way, but very much because I knew this positive feedback loop was, pumping me up and making me feel great about it. And it's gone on into social media now. And I started putting out videos on Instagram about a year ago, and it's gone absolutely viral. I had one video that has done over 1 million views, and so suddenly I'm realizing that the podcast has led to the social media, and the social media has led to invitations to speak on stage at conferences and stuff. So it's the whole thing is really powerful. And I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm hogging
No,
the
you
conversation.
can see I'm prepping for a next question. What I'm wondering about is if it's possible to unravel that kind of connection between your involvement in Toastmasters and the success or the journey of this podcast. Where's their intersect point? How have they helped each other?
Oh, in a big way, and I can relate to what Paul was saying just about like my impromptu speaking. When we do the table topics during a Toastmasters meeting, every question that is asked, the way they're waiting for volunteers to kind of put their hand up or whatever, like I'm literally holding my hand down because I could jump into every one. And I'm just like, I want to answer that. I want to answer that. I want to answer that. And I'm usually the Toastmaster, so I should be doing the least amount of speaking. And so it's definitely helped in that way. And because, after 250 episodes, you just get into, there's all sorts of insights and intellectual property that I've created. And there's these frameworks that I've got in my mind. Like I've got all these acronyms that I use to describe certain things, and they're all up there now. So I can draw upon them at any time. And it's super useful like that. And I found that as a result of doing all these podcasts, coming up with a script every week, it's essentially like doing a speech every week and standing up in front of your club and speaking. And what I found is that when I'm in the process of, I'll get asked to do a speech in my own club, and I'll often only start writing the speech an hour before I'm presenting it. And because I've just gotten so regular about this, is that I just know, okay, I can do that, no problem. I don't hesitate, and I don't kind of think, oh God, I could never do that. It's just now, yeah, no problem, I'll be there. And so that's become very powerful because of just the repetition of every week doing another podcast.
You mentioned the success of an Instagram that went viral, but at a more rudimentary level for the podcast, how does Gavin go about marketing? How do you let people know you exist and you're there? Is it word of mouth or something more sophisticated?
It is a combination. I think word of mouth is very powerful, and but getting out there can be difficult. And like if I was giving advice to anyone starting a podcast today, I think you'd be sort of saying that when you start your podcast, there's a good chance you're going to be in the new podcast sort of page that is on Apple or whatever it is, and you'll only be on that page for a week or two, and then you're going to disappear into obscurity. So make the most, like have 5 or 6 episodes recorded and put them out a day after a day after day, so that you've got, because I think after people hear, maybe the fifth episode, they start to kind of know, like, and trust you. They start to feel like that, I like this guy, I like his stuff. Whereas if you leave it a week until the next one they can listen to, it kind of I think you can lose, you could be discovered, they'll discover somebody else in the meantime. So when somebody discovers your content and it resonates with them, they want to hear something else. So have like a little binge bank, as we call it, there, so that they can just go straight to it.
I asked Paul about the principles of Toastmasters and how they help you in any way in your podcasting. So, like, other than that, kind of the table topics and the kind of ability to stand up on your feet and instantly do something, is there anything about the being a member of a committee at your club or in the wider Toastmaster world that you've taken on that you can kind of see the synergies that help you do business better or podcast better?
Well, I think that they kind of all feed off of one another. When I think about my Toastmasters journey, I started out, sitting at the back, well, so to speak, not really engaging heavily, and then getting a little bit more engaged, and then starting to give speeches, and then thinking, oh, look, if I get through each level, I move up, through the pathways, and I get points for the club. And so I started to get more. But where it really made a big difference was just the structure of writing a speech. um, and you start with the introduction, and then you have maybe 3 points, and then finish with a conclusion. It's as simple as that. You can kind of do a podcast script. It might be longer, it might be more sort of elaborate or whatever, but that's the kind of framework that I use. And so doing that, using it day after day after day, then I found that all of the podcasting I was doing was making me better at giving talks in the club. More confidence, not feeling like an imposter anymore, just feeling like, yeah, I'm here, and I'm going to get up and speak and do an impromptu speech in a club, in a strange club, no problem. Just because you're kind of gotten so familiar with speaking into the microphone that it becomes quite easy. And then where it becomes handy is all of the sort of lessons that I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do I scale my own podcast? How do I get in front of more people? And there's little hacks you can find, things you can do online, like sharing it in LinkedIn, for example, and places like that. Um, and I've got my podcast is actually uploaded to YouTube every week in the video format and audio only format. And I start becoming useful to my club when they're talking about promoting an event or something like that. And I can say, no, don't do that, do this. And it's because you become so ingrained in that whole kind of area of digital marketing, putting yourself out there, publishing, that you become quite an expert in that area, even if you don't feel like you're an expert.
You mentioned the success of the podcast leading to invites to speak on stages around the world. Surely then the Toastmaster experience leads to you being much better able to step up those couple of short steps onto the stage and perform. How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I had done plenty of speeches in my club when I was first invited to speak on stage, and it was on a stage in London. I was asked to do a keynote at a commercial property summit, and this was back in 2020. So it was actually just around the time of my first podcast. And I remember thinking, this is no problem. I've done this 100 times. Like, I'll just stand up on the stage and I'll start speaking. But there was about 250 people in the room. And I can remember standing up for the first time on in a kind of a big stage, and starting to speak and feeling a little nervous, but I felt okay. But what happened to me was my mouth went completely dry, and I'd never experienced that before, where I could almost not swallow. It was so dry. And I remember realizing, now I know why all these guys bring a bottle of water up to the to the lectern, because whatever it is about standing on a stage in front of a lot, I think that maybe the body's nervous reaction is that it just, all of your mouth goes completely dry. So that was an experience.
There's a good bit of advice in there. I'm going to pose a question and have you think about it, and I'm going to take you back at the end to answer it. So I want to know about your tech setup, and we'll come back to you on that. Gavin, for now, thank you. And we'll switch over to Kevin O'Reilly. Kevin, welcome again. Division F Director and incoming Club Growth Director. Congratulations. And a new podcaster. What's it like to be so new and fresh? What's the feeling? Is it warm and fuzzy and glowing, or is it uncharted waters?
A little bit of both, I think, Brian. At the very beginning, it is extremely daunting. I suppose everything is extremely daunting when you've never done it before and you don't know what you're doing. But once you get into the swing of it, similar to what Gavin had said, once you get into the swing of it, it becomes a little more natural. The first 5 or 6 is not very comfortable. You're still fumbling. You're still trying to work out the technology. But when you get past your 8, 9, 10, and I have 30 recorded, but I'm releasing them in batches of 8 as a series, you actually look forward to doing them. I really look forward to doing them now. So I would maybe record 2 or 3 a week, and I would just keep banking them until I need them. Now, anybody out there, editing is not my bag. I can do it, but I'm extremely slow at it. And I think that is something that holds me back. And if it holds me back, it is potentially going to hold other people back as well. So I'm always open to how can I edit more quickly, or who can I get to edit for me at a reasonable price.
A question I wanted to ask Gavin, but I'll now ask it to you, is this podcast is carefully chosen. Does it dovetail with your business, and are you hoping for kind of synergies and opportunities to come from the topics you discuss in the podcast to the clientele who will discover your expertise within your area of business? And tell us what that area of business is. I see a sign behind you that might give a clue, but tell us anyway.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And I think the idea behind creating the podcast, apart from it being a level 4 pathway on Toastmasters and a challenge that I thought, I've never done this before, I'll give it a go, because I'm trying to stretch myself in every area of business. And after having a conversation with a friend and mentor of mine, he suggested, why don't you do it? Why don't you? Hey, I think he has, similar to Gavin, nearly 200, 250 episodes. It's called Fire in the Belly, where he brings people on from all walks of life in business, and they talk about what the fire in their belly is. And it doesn't matter if it's from crocheting to running 5 marathons in a week, whatever the fire in the belly is. And it's absolutely fantastic. I would recommend it and give it a listen. But with my business, this is almost like raising that business to the next level. It's about helping potential future clients pick upon some of the ideas that are already going ahead. So my podcast is called My Worst Interview Ever. And it was purposely called that because if I was to call it My Best Interviews Ever, not too many people actually wanted to listen to it. So I tested the title. And when I used My Worst Interview Ever, it was almost like, oh, I really want to hear this. I want to hear what is going on. But so did I, which was a little ironic because I knew what was coming up. But in one of the episodes I recorded, I was left a little bit dumbfounded because somebody was actually kidnapped during an interview process and then dumped out in the middle of a strange town that they've never been to before, times before they had phones in their pocket and hadn't a penny in his pocket. and he had to walk home from where he was. And I thought I knew everything about interviews, but I never ever thought that that was something that happened. And that was just one of them. The other ones, some of them are completely hilarious, and others are completely embarrassing. And like Gavin had mentioned around his podcast about being very vulnerable and open, it is almost therapeutic. We have a bit of a laugh. It's very therapeutic. They almost feel like they get it off their chest, share it with the world, and they go away feeling a lot better. So it does definitely feed into my business.
You mentioned deliberately stretching yourself. Is this something you are also applying to your journey through Toastmasters, because you are flying up the ranks and getting elected and taking on some really big roles? Is this part of a master plan?
Well, it's part of a be better than yesterday, Kevin. That is my mindset. That is my philosophy in life. It is always to be better than yesterday. And that could be a millimeter or 1% better than yesterday, as long as it's going in the right direction. And this role is going to stretch me. But what it will give me is it will give me a lot of learning. And there are people out there who have done this role before. And I've, in my preparation for the election, I reached out to 10, 15 current, past club growth directors from around the world who I now can lift the phone and have a conversation with. And that was because I wanted to stretch myself. I wanted to learn something different. And this seems to be a trend with me. If I don't know it and it might benefit either myself or my family, then I'm going to go and learn it.
You are renowned for your knowledge around interviews, and I'm thinking of them from the kind of the Jewel at Dawn type of interview through to job interviews. Is there something about the interview setup that kind of bodes well for the exchange that will happen between the parties? What is it about it? Because it makes for wonderful podcasting content. Like you can have talking heads, you can have panel discussions, but the interview style seems to be number one in the charts. It seems to be the one that people can stay listening to for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 3 hours. Interviews seems to work. What is it about it?
I just think it's because people are inherently nosy and they just want to hear what somebody else has to say. Well, it's like that show Big Brother. Why was it so successful? And I say why was it because I'm not sure if it's even still around now. But why was it so successful? It was a peek behind the curtain. Why is Coronation Street and EastEnders going so long? Because people want to see other people and what goes on in their lives. It's the same as a podcast, and it's the same as that sort of interview style. I prefer the interview style, as opposed to what Gavin would do with regards to just going on and speaking to camera or speaking to microphone. I prefer the interaction. I prefer to feed off somebody else and to have them feed off my energy as well. I think it brings a better dynamic. Although I am going to also try what Gavin has done and just a piece from myself in the camera and add that as part of the podcast show. So it was, really worthwhile coming on this evening, if for nothing else, but to pick up little points and tips from all of the other podcasters on this evening.
So we have the Kevin monologue to look forward to. As a club growth director incoming, do you see a bigger role? And I might have heard it from your candidate's speech to the voters, that podcasting or radio can play a role in the growth of Toastmasters in the district?
Absolutely, absolutely, and initiatives like this, and yourself and Olga putting this on, it's such an initiative. It is so important because it'll reach people who are on the fence, and it also appeals to different people who either like to consume information in a different format. So there are people who like to read it. There's people who like to watch it. There's people who like to hear it and watch it. There's people who like to go and test it out, like within the clubs. This is bringing a different dynamic, and I absolutely love this. And what you are doing and what you have done over this year is fantastic. And as part of my club growth director role, I want to continue with this, but I really want to blow this up as best we can, get it to every platform that we can possibly get it out to, and give it to as many people so they can look back on it and go, do you know what? I want to do that one day.
We're 1 hour in, and you're the first person to mention that Olga Byrne is running the Green Room and this series. So, greetings to who you can't see behind the scenes, to Olga, who's pulling the strings and pushing people onto stage technically and all that. Just on what you just said, is it that because podcasting and video and non-linear and non-broadcast media is so hot at the moment? We saw it in the US elections where the place to be was on Joe Rogan, and maybe one candidate didn't get there and didn't do so well accordingly. Is it because it's so hot, or is it because inherently it's a great medium to show off what Toastmasters is about?
I suppose both in a sense, and it depends on your intention and how you decide to use it. I think for us going forward as Toastmasters, we need to utilize it a lot more. We are a public speaking organization after all, and I don't see as much public speaking on our socials as potentially we could. Any club can grab a camera or grab a phone and literally have someone send something into the camera and it goes straight up onto their socials. I get that that is a challenge. I was one of those people that if you stuck a camera in my face and said, Kevin, can you say a couple of words into about the meeting tonight? And I've been like, absolutely not. No, 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 no. But I am a convert. And I don't know if that's because of business. I don't know if that's because of Toastmasters. I don't know if it's because of Toastmasters and business. Probably both. Toastmasters has helped me gain that confidence and also give me those opportunities to fail forward. And that's what Toastmasters brings for me. I have only been in Toastmasters since late 2019. And like Gavin, sat at the back of the virtual room online, when in person, sat at the back of the actual room. And then within 6 months, just thought, do you know what? I'm here. Why not? Let's give this a go. Because it was something that was holding me back. It was something that absolutely petrified me. And just to again touch on Gavin, I'm sorry for picking on you, Gavin, but just to touch on what Gavin had said about that dry mouth, you're right in thinking that's actually a prehistoric nervous system response. Because what happens is if we get into fight or flight, our mouth doesn't need saliva because we won't be eating anything. And that's what a saliva is for. So it dries up the mouth so you can run away quickly. It moves bits of the body to where it needs to be. It moves the energy, it moves to the legs, to the lungs, to the heart, so you can run away as quickly as possible. So that's why the mouth dries up whenever we get that nervousness or afraid. That's your first sign. One of the other signs is sweaty palms. So if you've got some sweaty palms, yeah, my suggestion as a speaker, keep a hanky in your pocket so that you can squeeze it just before you get up. That'll keep the hands dry. Because what happens when you walk up on the stage normally? There's a handshake. Whether you're in Toastmasters or at a conference or at a business networking event, there's always a handshake. So keep a tissue in your right pocket so you can give it a squeeze. And I recommend this even for my clients who we're prepping for interviews. Keep it in your right pocket because 9 times out of 10 you'll be shaking the right hand.
Good tip, good tip. Final question before we go back to the four of us on screen. And it comes from what we've just discussed there, that are we missing a trick to not put cameras in Toastmaster clubs at podiums? So I'm from a hybrid club and we have a multi-angle camera on, and it aids us to do the hybrid aspect so that people abroad can be at our club meeting. But for the world we live in with YouTube and broadcast yourself taglines and the ever presence of video and social, that the stage we need to be on is not necessarily 2 foot off the floor in some hotel, but it is the stage that is looking down the barrel of a lens and being good and authentic. Is this something you're looking at, like in business or for club growth?
For business, everything I do outside of my office is recorded. whether that be on a phone or that be on one of the lovely little DJI mics that I carry around with me. Everything is recorded for me to look back on, for one, but also to use for content, for two. I'm a great believer in anything you do should work really hard for you, no matter what it is. So, with regards to a podcast for me looks like 5 weeks worth of clips as well as a podcast. So, that's working really hard for me. Social media content. If we can move that into the clubs, great. Now, like everything else, change is very difficult. And we've been doing something a certain way for so long. It almost needs to be the thought process of, well, what is this giving us? And if people can't see the value in that, or if we can't help them see the value in that, then they're not going to do it. But not only that, there is a cost to it. There is a cost, and there's also a skill set needed. It is difficult to find a club that has the finances and the skill set together. They may have one and maybe not the other. But it would be great if we could get a camera just sitting at the back of the room and maybe just live streaming the whole Toastmaster event, but maybe not with regards to the interaction. I know when I was a speaker, I would have loved someone to record my first speech and would have hated it at the very same time. But to look back on now, I would have loved it.
After Sunday, when I was 40 years in radio, and knowing that I have that recording from 40 years ago, while I'm not willing to jump to listen to it again, it's great to know that it's there for ever and for archiving purposes. I'm going to call Paul and Gavin back onto the stage, and we are running at about 1 hour and 8 minutes at the moment. So for anyone watching, we hope to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. And thank you for your forbearance and staying with us. Guys, podcasting, it's been on the go just around 21 years, and it is forever hitting those numbers. It refuses to spike when the media interest in it spikes. It just keeps growing at a very steady growth rate all along. It's going to happen. It's going to be huge because of what we've seen in video, and I think of podcasting very much in the audio space, but it mixes with the video as well. For the future, where do you guys see this going? Uh, what's possible out there? And I kind of ask it so that we can inspire people to jump on board and try it themselves. What's the possibilities that are around the corner that you might see?
The situation is that we have available to us at negligible cost the ability to produce a newspaper, the ability to produce a radio station, and the ability to produce a television program. These are incredible abilities which were never available to, well, I'll use a glib phrase, previous generations. Extraordinary ability. On top of that, generally speaking, educational ability is going up. So, and the fact that ordinary people like us are capable of producing something that can be heard in Antarctica or seen in New Zealand, the fact that this can happen will simply inspires more and more people all the time, especially when people realize that they have in their hands a smartphone. Nearly everybody has one of these. You can produce a podcast on one of these. You can produce a television program on one of these. You can do more or less everything. You can edit, the whole works, and the sound quality is perfectly adequate. Maybe not studio, but so I think it's inevitable that more and more people will communicate their opinions, their prejudices, their loves and hates, and show off their egos. All of the traits that human beings will be available from now on. I agree with what Kevin was saying a few minutes ago. Every single Toastmasters club, if it got around its members and talked about it and got people on board, could put up on a television program speeches that are happening. No problem at all. And they'll even put up the evaluations. And you could have beginners and experts. You could do it, would, of course, raise the interest in a bit of humor at the meetings because otherwise, wouldn't be as attractive. But yes, I think there's huge potential. I think video podcasting, which is increasing at a faster rate than audio podcasting, is definitely one of the coming things. It's yeah. That I gotta leave time for the others. That's my answer.
Around the screen, I'll go to Gavin next.
Yeah, I think we are in the what people are referring to as the attention economy, and it's got to the point now where having the ability to speak and to persuade and to put your view across out there with confidence and just to communicate ideas and thoughts and things, being able to do that is hugely powerful. And the more persuasive you are, the better you are at making a living at this. You can turn your ideas into a product. You can sell your product. I mean, there's just a huge amount of opportunity out there around these skills. And I think it's only going to grow. As Paul said, video podcasting is growing faster than anything else. So YouTube seems to be the place. It's kind of hard to believe that YouTube is now 20 years old as a platform. And it's not going anywhere. Like there are people that my kids watch that are now have about 100 million followers and subscribers on their YouTube channel. Those guys are bringing in, $7 to $10 million a year in income just from kids watching TV. It's just incredible. The opportunity is massive. So I think the ability to speak, communicate, get ideas across, and the fact that we can all do this for free, I think, is hugely powerful.
And Kevin?
Well, it's ironic that you asked this question, and we were discussing about video podcasting. I was literally thinking about that today. I was on a video podcast last week or the week before with a girl called Tina Calder from Excalibur Press, and when you see it from the side of a guest, it's not as mind-blowing as you may think it to be. And what I mean by that is there was 3 phones and an iPad, little microphones on, and a stage almost set up behind us to create that sort of feeling and comfort and vibe. There was even little covers that went over the chairs, changed the color of the seats. I thought, wow, I've never sort of understood what went on behind the scenes. I suppose it's like everything else, Brian. You're in TV and radio, and the things that you probably see behind the scenes when you first started, you probably thought, oh, is that how they do that? Well, that was exactly my thought process, and it went from being this big of a deal to I could do that. I can do that. So the thought process has been, and lucky for me, and not lucky for my son, he's doing a cinematography course in college, and he's into his second year, so they have to do lots of editing, lots of recording, filming, and I'm thinking, oh, son, I can't wait to utilize your talents and skills and give you lots of experience that you'll need for your course. So
you found your editor.
I have, I think so. So
you grew an editor, and you're good growth, so you're good at growing things. Brilliant. I did ask Gavin a question earlier, and it was to come back to us about your tech. So can you describe, Gavin, your tech setup? Like, people might think this takes van loads of equipment. How simple is it?
It's pretty simple. You can set it up with on a shoestring budget. I know somebody that had a very popular podcast, and I think the first like 25 episodes were recorded onto the voice note on his phone. And so I think a lot of people will often use that as an excuse not to go and start. It's like, oh, I have to buy a better camera before I couldn't possibly upload to YouTube with my phone. And it just becomes this obstacle to kind of getting started. And I think the old saying, use what you've got, start where you are, and just get on with it, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
to use the term. But my tech stack is I use this one here for online stuff is a Shure microphone. I have the Rode podcast mics that I plug into this device here, and that just gives a good quality. It means I can plug 4 mics in and I can have an interview, and I record onto a camera, upload I mix everything in my Final Cut Pro on my MacBook. And then when I'm doing interviews now, similar to StreamYard, which we're on, I use a thing called Riverside, and it's where you record to the person's computer. So you don't have things like where the Zoom call, gets glitchy in the middle of a bad signal or something. It's because it's recording to each person's computer. Then it downloads from that person, so you get the whole thing uninterrupted. High quality camera and audio, and that's it. I keep it pretty simple. It's really the consistency, I think, is the big thing. It's not the tech that's important. It's the consistency of just doing it every single week and just not letting any excuses get in the way, because once you miss one, it becomes easier to miss another.
Brian, Brian, just can I chip in one thing. The founder of Toastmasters, Ralphie Smedley, said a very good thing once in one of his letters that he wrote. He said Toastmasters Club should be a laboratory where you can experiment. Now, there is no better place that I know of anyway where somebody can get their act together in terms of, I want to do some podcasting, because you can record an episode in the path, the educational project. You can make a short speech and play the result, and you can put it up on the internet. Nobody other than your club members needs to hear it. You can get evaluated, have your episodes evaluated at your club. You can do all that without as preparation for going, we'll say, going public. So I couldn't fly the flag too gloriously for anything more than the Toastmasters International project to be found in Pathways, our education program.
I'm without a timekeeper tonight, so I'm doing my own timekeeping and suffering. But let's wrap with 2 last questions. So I want you to think about a final tip on podcasting that you might give our viewers out on LinkedIn and YouTube today. But also, before we finish, and I did ask you to look into this earlier, we are 4 white male people on the screen, and we are very diverse across this series of Toastmasters Unplugged, but not very diverse in vision tonight. So I asked you to maybe think of some luminaries or people of interest or people that you follow or subscribe to that are women in podcasting that we could give a shout out to. And maybe I'll kick off and then we can go around the screen from Kevin to Gavin to Paul. And it's just one of my favorite podcasts for the last 2 years is The Trawl with Marina Purkis and Gemma Forte. It's UK politics because I love any politics, but their strapline is that they follow things on social media so we don't have to, like being on X and things like that. And they digestify what happens in politics and put it into a podcast in a kind of way of it says in the papers, is on the radio every morning. This is, it says in the podosphere or even in the broader social media world. What are people saying and lampooning and cartooning of what's going on in politics? I just love it. The Trawl is that's what it is. So I said I'd go to Kevin next, I think.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. Well, for me, the one person that I really enjoy actually being on her podcast and listening to her is Tina Coulter. I mentioned her earlier, from Excalibur Press. She is neurodiverse. She runs her own marketing company, and she has ADHD. And she
Is
is
that
a
Belfast 247? Did she
yes,
do that as well?
she does. She does. And she's a massive, massive champion of ADHD, and especially in women, because it's very underrepresented, and it's not widely known what the differences are between males and females. Just listening to what comes out of her mouth, it could be anything, and it is fantastic. But actually being on the show, seeing how it's all set up, understanding the amount of preparation that goes into it, and what she has to sit and do is amazing. She brings on business owners from all walks of life, and they just have a general conversation. But the stuff that comes out is fantastic. We could be talking about what kind of dogs do we have, and the next thing we're talking about what is the best marketing tool that we can be using, what is the direction of business, what do we see on the news. She's absolutely fantastic. I would check her out as and when you can.
And is it Tina Codwell, or is it she got a title for the podcast?
No, I just think it's Tina Calder, Excalibur Press. Yeah, Calder.
And Gavin.
Well, the first person that popped into my mind was the first person to bring me onto her show, and that is Carol Tallon. And Carol runs a couple of different sort of enterprises, but one of them is I think it's the Irish Property Show or something. I think the name might have changed over the last couple of years, but it's a weekly show, and they talk about news, and they get the housing crisis here in Ireland and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite a local Irish thing, but she talks about the construction sector. So it's quite niche for the area that I'm in, but I find her excellent, and she's been good to me. She's always sending people my way and stuff like that. So I have a lot of time for Carol.
Carol Tallon, thank you. And Paul?
Well, Siobhan Fitzgerald in our district, living outside Galway, has a podcast called Let's Stand Public Speaking. Now, she's a terrific podcaster, but she hasn't recorded many episodes. The person I would like to recommend is Angela Nuss, who has a podcast called Talking Toastmasters. Now, she's from the United States. So, Talking Toastmasters, Angela Nuss. And last one I have to say is a thing called True Spies, which I like a lot with Vanessa Kirby. And so there's a few ones with women involved in them.
And finally, 3 quick tips from ourselves. I'll make it 4. I'll throw one in at the end, starting with Kevin. A tip for people in Toastmasters and podcasting.
Well, the very first thing, and it's touching on what everybody has sort of said this evening, is just do it. Let's get rid of these excuses. You can record it on a phone. Let's just do it. It's usually the start that stops most people from starting. All you need is that moment of courage to say, I'm going to do it, and then commit to it. If you have to lift up your phone and just record it as a note on your phone, just do it. If you have to use your camera, take yourself off into a forest like I did, just do that as well. Take your dog for a walk, just record it. But don't look back in a couple of years and think, do you know what? I could have done that. I should have done that, but I didn't do it. It's a start that stops most people. Just get started.
Gavin, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I would completely mirror Kevin's thoughts there. I think back to my own start, and I had started a podcast about a year before I did my podcast. Started my second podcast. My first one, I did one episode, interviewed a guy, and then never did anything after that. And I can remember I'm one of the 98% of podcasters who don't get beyond 7 podcasts. And I thought, no, I'm going to try it. And that was 5 years ago. And it's just the snowball that has been created from that. It's like a flywheel in a car, just gets easier and easier. So just get started. People suffer from imposter syndrome. And the way to do that is just fake it till you make it, and just put out the content. Don't worry about what people are listening. You're maybe a week ahead of somebody else who's at this journey, and that's enough to help that person who's a week behind you. And so, it's a way to look at it.
Thank you. And Paul?
Get to love the sound of your own voice. So many people cringe when I've been speaking to them about the idea of recording themselves. And that's something you have to get through. You'll never be a podcaster or never move forward in this area unless you get over the fact that you don't hear yourself recorded the same way as you hear yourself when you're speaking. So love your own voice, practice with it, and well, after that, you're ready.
Brilliant. And my tip is, when you do start, don't accuse the platforms of hiding away your podcast and not giving you free discoverability and the position 10 on the top 100 podcasts next week. Bring your podcast, bring your audio content to your audience where they are already assembled. So where are they? Find them and bring it to them. That might even be offline, but that I'll stop on that. And way over time, heading for 1 hour 28, with thanks to Olga in the green room, who has been pushing all the buttons and keeping us looking well focused and everything tonight.
Brian, can I cut across just ever so slightly? Can we bring Olga on?
Can Olga bring Olga on? Then we'll know the answer. Does she want to be on?
Hello. Olga is on.
Hi, Olga.
Good evening, gentlemen. That was an amazing, thought-provoking evening, which is what Toastmasters Unplugged is all about.
Olga, you're doing a fantastic job. Brian, you're doing a fantastic job. I just wanted to publicly thank you for doing this for the last year and for agreeing to continue to do this in the new Toastmaster year ahead. Really appreciate it. Really excited for what this is going to bring. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Lots of ideas, and you guys talking tonight has sparked additional ideas. So thank you. I'm going to take myself off the stage so Brian can finish off.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, gentlemen, for your contributions tonight. People should look up your respective podcasts. My worst interview ever, Behind the Facade and Irish Talkers. I don't really have one to push myself, but if you look up radio.ie, you can find out more about my radio interests. And thank you for your time tonight. And we'll be definitely checking out a lot of the tips and names that have been exchanged here this evening. To everyone who's followed us online, thank you for tuning in. Toastmasters Unplugged returns monthly, and we've got some great things lined up, including some champions. And into July, we will be here. And as Kevin has said, Olga has committed to keeping it running into another 12 months. So that's lots to look forward to there. With that, thank you, and very good evening or good morning, whatever time you're listening to us, because we can say that in podcasting because it's listening on demand at your own time. Take care, and that's it for Toastmasters Unplugged.